He was deposited onto the obsidian floor with all the ceremony of a broken appliance. The guards, plated in armor that shimmered like an oil slick in starlight, gave him a single disdainful glance before stalking off, boots clicking against the crystalline panels that pulsed faintly beneath their steps. The chamber, no, amphitheater, was vast, absurdly so. Rows upon rows of alien dignitaries loomed overhead in floating thrones, their elongated silhouettes watching with detached amusement. Somewhere a translator drone hummed as it tried, rather bravely, to keep up with a dozen dialects and 3 forms of interstellar sarcasm. Matthew lay there for a moment, then rolled onto his back and stared at the ceiling. It was domed, transparent, and offered a view of the stars that would have made any astronomer weep. He raised a hand weakly, as if trying to high-five Orion's belt. "Okay," he said, "so I'm either being judged by an evil space opera tribunal, or Comic-Con got wildly out of hand." A ripple of laughter spread across the chamber, subtle at first. One of the warlords, whose face resembled a geometric meat grinder, made a clicking sound of amusement. A Trivan diplomat emitted a puff of green vapor that Matthew assumed was laughter, unless it was gas, in which case, same result. The joke had landed. Sort of. A voice sliced through the mirth like a vibroblade. "Silence!" She descended from the higher tiers of the chamber, not by stairs but by levitation disc. Because of course she did. Clad in obsidian armor inlaid with glimmering filaments, she moved like someone who had never been uncertain in her life. Her features were angular, refined, almost human, except for the long, tapered ears that flared backward like stylized antennae. Matthew blinked. If Legolas and a sci-fi dominatrix had a child, she'd be the result. "I am Commander Varellin of House Tish," she said, her voice smooth, sharp, and devoid of affection. "You are Matthew Ellis of Earth. Your people surrendered without contest. Your planet has been classified as Class C obedient. Your presence here is ceremonial." "Ceremonial?" he repeated, pushing himself up to sit cross-legged. "What am I, the after-dinner mint?" Whispers scattered like flocks of birds across the high tiers. Varellin did not smile. Her ears twitched ever so slightly. "You are here to demonstrate why your species should not be destroyed outright." "Well," Matthew said, stretching his arms, "you're off to a bad start if this is the welcoming party. Where's the fruit basket? Do I get a little towel shaped like a swan?" A few chuckles. Even one of the guards smirked, though they quickly covered it with a cough that sounded suspiciously like Kabork. Varellin descended another meter, now at eye level with the prisoner. "You believe this is humorous?" "No," Matthew said, and his voice shifted ever so slightly. Still light, but firmer. "I think you think this is humorous. You've all decided what I am, that I'm weak, software, harmless, and now you're curious to see if I'll dance." Varellin regarded him with a look that could cut glass. "We know what you are. The moment your defense satellites fell, the moment your leaders offered terms instead of war, you revealed yourselves. This court convenes merely to decide whether your species will be allowed to persist in servitude or be recycled for resources." "Recycled," Matthew said. "That's a fancy word for vaporized. We prefer not to be crude. And yet here I am, without pants." There was, in fact, a notable lack of pants. The tunic they'd given him resembled a robe designed by someone who had only read about clothing once in a comic strip. It had no fasteners and was held together by some kind of static field that buzzed every time he shifted. "Feels like I'm wearing a bedsheet powered by anxiety." Varellin's ears twitched again. "You will be held for final judgment," she said. "Until then, perhaps you might reflect on the position of your species." Matthew tilted his head. "What, like a think piece? I survived the Valari tribunal and all I got was this lousy vaporization?" He grinned. "Catchy headline." Varellin did not respond. Instead, she turned and floated away, her cape catching the artificial wind like a flag in retreat. Guards moved in, and Matthew stood slowly, raising his hands in mock surrender. As he was escorted through the ship's winding, gleaming halls, each corridor humming with unfamiliar energy, every wall embedded with organic-looking veins of light, he couldn't help but notice the number of cameras trained on him. Or perhaps they weren't cameras. Maybe they were weapons. or light fixtures, or highly judgmental automated butlers. Either way, they blinked. The cell they placed him in was surprisingly clean. No iron bars, just a shimmering field of energy he could see through, but not touch. The walls curved, smooth and slightly warm, and the only furniture was a block of crystal that seemed to function as both a bed and a table, depending on how one contorted themselves. He poked it, and it changed color. That was something, at least. Note to self, he muttered. Alien jail, 1 star, would not book again. The lights dimmed. From the opposite cell, a growl sounded, low, guttural, and threatening. A creature loomed in the shadows, tall and furred, its eyes bioluminescent and narrowed. Matthew leaned toward the barrier. Hi, you like card games? The growl continued. I'm thinking of starting a prison club. You, me, maybe get the other guys. Call it Against Our Will, a memoir. We could sell the rights. Silence. All right, tough crowd. He sat down on the crystal block and rubbed his hands together. No tools, no weapons, no clear path. But his heart beat steadily. Not out of fear, not even defiance. Just something else. A rhythm older than war. Something he'd always felt when he stood back up after falling, when he told a joke in the worst moment possible, when he was outmatched and outgunned and chose to smile anyway. Somewhere above, in a chamber filled with star-born conquerors, Virelin sat alone before a holoscreen, replaying the footage, rewinding it again and again, watching the human, listening to the laughter, and wondering very quietly why her ears had twitched. The door slid open with a hiss that sounded almost like a sigh of boredom. Matthew blinked against the sterile light of the corridor, rubbing sleep from his eyes, or whatever passed for sleep in this glittering tomb of alien bureaucracy. Commander Virelin stood there, arms crossed, her long ears twitching in that subtle, unreadable way that had already become a strange kind of comfort. Up, she said simply. You're coming with me. Matthew grinned, teeth a little crooked from a night spent imagining escape routes that involved zero chance of success. Finally, I thought I'd have to start a Humans Anonymous support group in here. We could have meetings. You bring the chips, I'll bring the terrible coffee. Virelin's lips twitched, but she said nothing. The corridor outside their cell pulsed with soft blue light, an organic rhythm like a living heartbeat running through the ship's veins. Matthew tried not to think about how many of those veins probably led to weapons capable of turning him into cosmic dust. Instead, he jabbed a thumb over his shoulder and whispered, Nice place you got here. Very sterile. It smells like a dentist's dream. Virelin ignored the jab. You will answer questions, she said. No jokes. Matthew raised both hands. Got it. No jokes. I'm about as serious as a meteor impact on a day off. She turned on her heel and floated ahead, her cloak trailing behind her like the tail of a comet. Matthew followed, careful to keep his balance on the polished floor that seemed to shift beneath their feet as the ship adjusted its gravity field. Twice he nearly stumbled into the wall, which was less embarrassing than it could have been, since the walls themselves occasionally pulsed and sighed like living organisms. They reached a chamber filled with flickering holodisplays, projecting star maps and intercepted transmissions, lines of alien scripts scrolling alongside images of distant planets. Virelin gestured to a chair that looked more like a cage with a cushion. Matthew sat down, trying to look dignified while mentally preparing his next quip. Star maps, he said, nodding. Great. I'm guessing this is the part where you tell me Earth's been marked, definitely not worth invading. Virelin raised an eyebrow. We know more than you think. Your planet's defenses were primitive, your weapons outdated, your alliances negligible. The Dominion does not fear Earth. Fear is overrated, Matthew said, leaning forward, but underestimate me, and you might regret it. She studied him for a long moment. Why do you joke when faced with death? Because, he said, tapping his chin, if I can't laugh at the absurdity of being stuck in alien jail with a bunch of warlords deciding my fate, then what's left? Crying? I left my tissues on Earth. Virelin's ears twitched, but she suppressed a smile. Instead, she pressed a few buttons on the console. A screen illuminated with grainy footage of human resistance fighters, clad in patched armor, wielding makeshift weapons, fighting not with technology but with sheer determination. They fought bravely, she said, but your people surrendered. Why? Matthew studied the images. Because sometimes you pick your battles. Sometimes you need to survive the day to fight the war. She nodded slowly. You are a philosopher as well as a prisoner. Not really, Matthew admitted. More like a guy who binge-watches old war movies and pretends to understand them. Varellin looked at him then, really looked, as if trying to decode a language written in the flicker of his eyes. And what do you hope to achieve? He shrugged. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe a better coffee maker. Maybe a reason to keep getting up when the universe punches you in the face. She laughed quietly, the sound like wind through crystalline trees. Your resolve is unusual. Before Matthew could reply, the chamber trembled, a low, rumbling vibration that set the hollow displays flickering. Red lights bathed the room as sirens screamed their warning. Varellin's hand went to the weapon at her side. Rebellion, she said. It's begun. Matthew grinned. Finally, some excitement. I was worried this place was going to be one big, boring lecture. The door burst open, and a Gruxian rebel, a creature covered in coarse fur with 6 glowing eyes, stumbled in, panting. The prisoners are breaking out, it growled. The ship is in chaos. Varellin's eyes narrowed. Stay with me. Matthew stood, brushing dust from his clothes. You're sure? Because I was just getting used to the whole hostage thing. She raised her weapon, but her voice softened. This is no longer about ceremony. It is about survival. Together they moved through the corridors, dodging plasma fire and malfunctioning gravity wells. Matthew cracked jokes in the face of danger, quipping about how zero gravity made his hair look like a badly styled mop and that his prison robe was cutting-edge fashion. Varellin found herself laughing despite herself, an alien commander amused by a human's defiant humor in the eye of destruction. They reached the detention block where Matthew's fellow prisoners surged forward, united in their fight against the oppressive regime. Among them were species Matthew had only read about in obscure star charts. Trevans with their flickering skin, cybernetic Nephrix humming with data streams, and even a few rogue Valari who had decided this rebellion was worth the risk. Varellin raised her weapon, but Matthew stopped her. Wait, maybe this is the real weapon. Not plasma or lasers, but the refusal to accept defeat. She hesitated, lowering her pistol just enough to see the fire burning in the human's eyes. Lead, she said, voice tight. Show me. And as the ship erupted into chaos around them, Matthew stepped forward, not as a prisoner, but as a catalyst. The rebellion had begun, and with it, the galaxy's perception of Earth and its stubborn hope was about to change forever. The airlock hissed, releasing a blast of cold vacuum and a spray of glittering stardust that settled like tiny diamonds on the cracked floors of the command deck. Varellin's ears twitched anxiously, catching the faintest hum of distant engines and the growing murmur of revolt. Matthew stood beside her, fingers tapping in impatient rhythm on the console, as if the entire ship depended on his nervous energy. Maybe it did. Your kind calls it hope, he said, voice low but steady. A stubborn thing that refuses to die, even when logic screams for surrender. Varellin nodded, scanning the holoscreens that flickered with the chaos spreading through the Valari flagship. War machines lay dormant, their crews having thrown down weapons or vanished into shadows. The rebellion wasn't just an uprising. It was a contagion of courage infecting every corner of the Dominion. Explain again why I agreed to follow you into a mutiny, she said dryly, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. Matthew grinned. Because deep down, you knew the High Council's idea of fun was boring, and this was way more exciting. He punched a button, and the main holoscreen pulsed with a transmission. Across the galaxy, the faces of countless species, Gruxian, Trivan, Nephrec, even Valari dissenters, watched, their eyes wide and unblinking. Matthew continued, This is not a declaration of war. It's a story about a dog named Laika, sent into the unknown, with nothing but faith and a stubborn heart. His voice rose, ringing through every speaker, every ship, every hidden rebel's ear. We don't fight because we want power. We fight because we want a future that's not written by tyrants. Virelin felt the tension in the room dissolve, replaced by something new. Electricity. A charge so palpable even the ship seemed to pulse in time with it. The old order, brittle and inflexible, began to fracture under the weight of a simple human truth. Matthew turned to her, eyes shining with the weight of battles fought and lost, yet still carried forward. I came here a prisoner, but I'm leaving a leader. Not because I have the strongest arm or the deadliest weapon, but because I refuse to stop getting up. She smiled, her long ears flicking with amused disbelief. You're an enigma, Earthling, dangerous in ways I hadn't anticipated. The chaos outside reached a crescendo as loyalists scrambled to maintain control, only to be met with unity from those once oppressed. The rebellion wasn't a military coup. It was a wave of hope, relentless and unexpected. As the dust settled, the High Council chambers lay empty, their power broken by the very creatures they had sought to dismiss. Virelin and Matthew stood side by side on the bridge, looking out at a galaxy awakening to new possibilities. You changed more than just the Dominion, she said quietly. You changed me. Matthew shrugged, a grin playing at his lips. Guess all those bad jokes and stubborn mornings paid off. The stars stretched endlessly before them, vast and uncharted. For the first time in centuries, the future was theirs to write, not with fear or domination, but with resilience and laughter. And somewhere, far below the chaos and politics, a six-eyed Gruxian taught rock, paper, scissors to a nervous Valari recruit, proving that even in the darkest places, hope found a way to play.